Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robert Nelson. I'm with Pivotal New Mexico. I use he, him pronouns. Welcome to our wonderful conversation on building better boards with Pamela Herndon and Jill Van Norwick. Thank you. Sorry about that. Before we get started, just a little bit about Pivotal New Mexico if you're not familiar. So Pivotal used to be the Grants Collective. We started in 2015 through 2016. I was actually their first employee 5 years ago. So it's unbelievable that we've made it this far. So our two biggest programs are Talent Academy, which is a big deep dive into grant writing. I see some familiar faces. Hey, Shana, who actually went through that program. So welcome back. Good to see you. That program itself is a deep dive into grant writing and grant seeking. We've helped over 51 different organizations raise about $12.5 million over the last 4.5 years. We're very happy about that. The next one is going to be starting here soon in August. We'll keep you posted on how that turns out. Our next program is our cooperative network, and so that is really what brings this event here today. It's a membership platform for folks to do a lot of grant seeking, but also share resources, funding resources, especially with different nonprofit organizations, and bring events like this and topics like this to our community as much as possible. And so with that, I'll ask folks if you could introduce yourselves in your chat, the name, your pronouns, your organization, and what you're hoping to bring to us today, or at least what you're hoping to take away from today, especially. And after Pamela and Jill introduce themselves, we'll do a quick poll just to get a feel for who's out in the audience. And with that, I will unspotlight myself and turn it over to Pamela and to Jill. Thanks so much for joining us today and welcome.
Well, good afternoon. It is really great to see you all here, and we are so happy that you have joined us. So I'm Pamela Herndon, and I serve as the CEO of KWH Law Center for Social Justice and Change. And we're located in Albuquerque. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we share office space with Global Ties ABQ. And you'll understand about that connection in just a moment when Jill introduces herself. So we have been looking at how do we make sure or help to make sure that boards and commissions, whether they're governmental or private, are diversifying so that the voices of the people in the communities that they serve are actually being heard, and to help them be more responsive, meaning the organizations, be more responsive to the people that they are serving. So we started this process just this year. We launched our first cohort. The first cohort will be graduating in June, and we will be telling you more about that in just a moment. But in the meantime, I'm going to turn the floor over to Jill so that she can introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about our project. So my name is Jill with pronouns she, her. I have been on a journey of board development for quite some time, having been experienced in boards that are not run well. Maybe some of you have had that same experience. And so it really irks me when we can't have good boards. And sometimes it's just a matter of understanding what you're supposed to do. And so part of this came from that, but part of it was really actually because of Pamela's husband, when he gave a speech and that was entitled, "Do Black Lives Really Matter?" And at the end, someone asked him, well, what can we do? And he said, just do something. And that was my light bulb. And I said, I've got this experience in board development. I can do something about this because I've sat on too many all white boards for a long time. So I saw Pamela and I told her about the idea. I need a partner. She said, absolutely. And so, boom, the project idea was born. And so from there, it was a matter of just trying to work it through, get the funding, and then get it started. And so we actually were the very first project that launched from the DEI project initiative through United Way Central New Mexico. So we're very excited that we're the first on the ground to actually get this thing moving. So I guess that's kind of it about me. You kind of understand where my impetus has come from, which is poorly performing boards. My other impetus of diversifying these boards so that they become truly representative of New Mexico. And why is that important? Is because the decisions that boards make, they need diversity of thinking and diversity of decision making. And that's so, so vital where we are today.
Awesome.
That's absolutely true. Oh, go ahead, Robert.
Sorry about that, Pam. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention another great point that came to Jill and I as we were working on this project is a California law that was passed. It's AB 979, which requires that by the end of 2021, that's this year, that the any California-headed public company must have at least one director on their board who is from an underrepresented community. And so they define an underrepresented community as an individual who self-identifies as Black, African-American, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, Native Hawaiian, or Alaska Native, or anyone who identifies as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. And so it was really exciting to see that piece of legislation pass, and also that by 2021, the requirement that the law mandates that these number of directors from underrepresented communities be increased by the end of the year 2022. So, we've been thinking about it would be really, really great to make sure that we could try to pass something like that in New Mexico. Can you imagine what that would look like? This is a state that is predominantly made up of people of color, that they should be sitting on the boards and commissions that are actually in the neighborhoods where they are. So we'll talk a little bit more maybe about that later and how your outreach in helping to make that happen will absolutely be essential in getting a piece of legislation like this through. It would be in the year 2023, because as you know, next year is a budget year and it will be a lot more difficult trying to get it through next year. But the year after that, watch out for us because, the sky's the limit. Robert, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Pamela. Thanks for that. Just shout out to the landscape that's coming. So we just want to post up a quick poll for folks. Just to kind of get a view of like who's in the audience today. And our question is, where are you in your journey to diversifying your board? In the very beginning, we're working on it, it's complicated, or woke and ready to work. So we'll give folks a few seconds just to answer that poll really quick and we'll just see where we're at. About half of the people have voted already, awesome. About like 10 more seconds for those on the call. All right, we'll go ahead and close the poll. Looks like about half in terms of, let's share these results. So a small amount are in the beginning, but for the most part, the majority are working on it still. And one person it's complicated. It always is complicated. And it looks like there are some people who are woke and ready to work. I always have some really good questions about that. So we may kind of revisit where that is and where you really are at the end of this or during discussion or during Q&A. And with that, I will pass it back to Pamela and to Jill and we'll go from there. Thanks, y'all.
So thank you. I'm closing some of these screens so I can see you all. So we have a PowerPoint that we're going to share with you all today to talk about how this process works. Stop us at any time. You don't have to wait till the end to ask questions, though we do have a segment at the end where we want to open the floor up completely and have your questions so that we can talk about exactly where you are and how you determined where you are. So let's take a look at our PowerPoint right now. And I want to make sure you all are seeing my screen. I have it in slide presentation so that you can see the whole screen rather than half of it. So our project is a project for New Mexico in collaboration with United Way of Central New Mexico and the Albuquerque Community Foundation. So they are the funders of our project as we have initiated this project in the state of New Mexico. And of course, you have our names there, Pamela Herndon, that's me, and Jill Van Northwick, that you met a little bit earlier this evening. And Jill's gonna jump in, and that's the way we make our presentation, because we tag team to make sure that we don't miss anything and we share all of this great information with you throughout this presentation. So let's talk a little bit about the vision, the mission, and the goals of the Building Better Boards with People of Color, which is the name of the organization that we are for working to help organizations throughout the state of New Mexico. And it doesn't matter whether they're governmental, whether they're private, or whether dogs are the central work of which they're doing. All of it fits in. So I just want you to know that one of the things that we found out is that there were lots and lots of people in New Mexico who were interested in sitting on boards, but what we found out is that they didn't necessarily have the connections on how to get on a board, or they didn't know what they needed to do once they were on a board. So Jill, what about this connections concept? Why is that important?
So first of all, I want to apologize for my little dog who's barking, and I'm actually going to throw her out of my office. So I'll hand it back to you for a moment, Pamela.
Okay. So as we talk about the connection, what we found out is that people who are sitting on boards, most of them are predominantly white. When they look to replace the people that are on the board, they would look for somebody like themselves. And so Jill is going to talk more about how that perpetuates a system and a board concept that doesn't support diversity, equity, and inclusion. So go ahead,
Right.
Jill.
Right. So, you know, that's one of the things I've experienced. It's probably one of the things that you've experienced if you're on a board. What we tend to do, what we have seen happen with boards is they say, hey, we need to increase our membership. We have someone rolling off. We need to bring somebody on, or we just don't have enough people on our board. And so often what happens is that we're told, well, do you have a friend? Do you have an acquaintance? Do you have somebody you work with? And so what happens is that we tend to go to our own networks. And if our networks are not diversified, then we're just going to perpetuate this system of creating more and more people who look like us, who have our own world, same worldview, often same socioeconomic status, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so then what we end up is with kind of a monotheistic type of a board with very little diversity of thinking.
And so as a result, as we put together Building Better Boards with People of Color, and let me tell you, that was really quite a name to come together for purposes of our website, but it's all on there. And we want to share with you the vision, the mission, and the goals. So first of all, if you look at our vision, so it was very important that we consider and how we implement envisioning a New Mexico that is truly representative of boards of directors that are diverse in their both in their thinking, their decision making, and their culture. So all of those were incredibly important as we began to work on putting together our first class. And then let's sort of look at what was the mission of our organization and how are we going to carry out the vision of our organization. So the mission was to train people of color to make sure that they understood what might happen once they get on a board, or how to make sure their voice is heard once they're on a board. Because sometimes when we find people of color being on a board, there is where there are no other people of color, that the voices tend to be suppressed. And we did not want that to happen. We wanted them to feel empowered, to be able to speak up, to be able to talk for their communities, and to help make sure that the organization that they're working on understands the networking, understands the opportunity that they have having a diversified board. And then we also wanted to make sure that they level the networking opportunities that are available to them when they are on boards. And Jill and I will tell you about how that networking opportunity will work as we continue forward. So Jill, have I missed anything on the mission statement? Okay, then let's move forward to the goal. So this is the part that Jill and I are so excited about. Every single person that comes through our Building Better boards with people of color will be placed on the board at the end of the class training. So we asked every single person, what type of board would you like to sit on, and what skills do you bring? Because we know that boards need specific types of skills at any different time, at any given time. It may be for accounting, it may be in the field of legal services and lawyers, it could be people who are visionaries, any of those subsequently defined areas could be what a board is looking for. And so we are matching people with the board's needs and with giving them the opportunity to grow on a board. Anything there, Jill? Are we good?
I would have to say one of the things that I've learned with this beta test group that we've just gone through is I would actually like to strengthen the relationship of boards who are interested in diversifying themselves to connect and partner with us at the beginning of the program rather than at the end. And so one of the things that I've been doing, and I am so encouraged at this conversation, is that we can be in touch with each other now before the start of our next program. So I would add that. Thank you.
Absolutely. So that is critically important to make sure that we look to see how we can run these programs in tandem, as Jill described. That would be an absolute perfect world, so that when we bring the combination of the groups together, we have made a really great placement. So how does our program work? So let's take a look at that. The program is set up to work for 5 months, and we meet once a month for 2 hours on the first Monday of the month, of every single month. And we started in the month of February. And so many people, one of the first questions that we hear people ask is, well, how are you getting these people of color to come to your board training so that they are ready and are willing and want to sit on various boards? Well, what we did was we reached out to communities of color throughout the entire state, and we had an overwhelming response. But Jill and I knew that this was our first class, and we wanted to limit the class size to make sure that there was enough opportunity for conversation, and that there would be a lot of interaction between the teachers who were coming in to help us with the training and the students who were part of the program. So we limited purposefully the number to 10. And so we were very happy that we had more people who wanted to come in that we could accommodate. But then for our next class, we will also be looking to them and others to join us. Anything on our first beginnings, Jill? So then that's how we began our class. Then we start putting together our curriculum modules. What is encompassed and what is covered in each one of our classes. So we want to share that with you, and you can always stop and ask us any questions at any time. So what we've done is we looked, first of all, to make sure that people will understand what is involved in putting together boards. We want them to know that there's generally and should be a governance committee that is a part of every single board. And that governance committee defines the type of people and the backgrounds of individuals that a board is looking for at any given time to make sure that it is fulfilled in carrying out its own goals and missions, and also making sure that it's carrying out its vision. So with respect to that, we talked about how the governance committee would work. Then we talked about the differences in terms of how boards would be involved in advocacy and advocating for whatever it is that they are standing for and that they are existing to carry out. In addition, we talked about fundraising and how that plays a big role in the operations of a board in terms of the organization that it sits oversight over. And so it is important to make sure that people who sit on boards understand their obligation also to give to an entity that you're a part of. So you don't just sit on it, you also support it, not only with the knowledge and skills that you bring, but also with your finances. And then there's oversight and accountability, so that the board is responsible for what the organization is doing. If something is going wrong, an entity is going to look, first of all, to the board of directors. Why didn't you pick this up? Or did you pick this up? And are you providing the oversight and providing the accountability that you should be providing? And then the other item that we talked about is the strategic planning that is involved and engaged in every single board operation, and to make sure that if you sit on a board and when you sit on a board, you understand the strategy that they want to use and how they will carry it out, and the planning that they have either over a 3 to 5 period. We are not expecting it to be any longer than that. Longer than that, you're going to have to come back and revamp, because our world is changing so fast. Jill, have we forgotten anything in our module 1? Hey, let's go and look at this. Happened on our very first meeting with our training students, with our cohort. Let's look at what module 2 looked like. So module 2 talked about the structure of the board and exactly how the board was created and its intention in carrying out the goals and responsibilities of the organization it had oversight over. And then the various committees, because there could be 3 committees, there could be 50 committees. It all depends on the makeup and the design of the board. And what was most important, we try to stress in every single one of our meetings, is that you need to understand the bylaws of the organization, because that will govern how you as a board will work, and then how the organization is expected to work with oversight of the board members. So the bylaws, to the extent that they are not covering some particular item, we always stress to understand the basics of Robert's Rules of Order. And generally, if something is silent, there are 2 places you're going to look: Robert's Rules of Order, or you're going to look at the laws that are in place in the state where the organization exists, if the bylaws specifically don't cover something. Anything else, Jill, in that category?
No, I would have to say, so as Pamela moves into module 3, she's going to move into something completely different. So really, these first 2 modules are all about the structure, all about the who's, the how's, the what, how these things get done from a structural perspective.
That's very right. So to understand these basics, this is the foundation that every single board member needs to have and understand. And that's the foundation that we give to our cohort. So let's look at module 3. So we're in the 3rd month now. And what we're studying now is the culture and the dynamics of the board. So when the board is making its decision, is it really bringing in the culture around the community that it is serving, or is it not? And what about the dynamics of what's happening in the community? So for example, if the board is responsible for something like, well, I don't know, homelessness, we could say, is the board considering the culture of the people? Is there money for them to have the homes that they need? And are the homes being kept in a situation or in a particular manner that would be supporting a family? So are they thinking about the culture in terms of what's needed, for example, in the various cultures in the area that they serve? So all of those are important. And to be effective boards, you have to think about these items in order to be an effective operational unit. And also, you have to have really good governance in terms of carrying out these items in order to make sure that you are envisioning and implementing those things that involve culture and dynamics. Anything else on those, Jill?
In addition to looking at the people that we serve on boards, the other side of culture and dynamics is how the board itself, what its culture is. Is it very formal? Is it very informal? Does the board chair have the last word on everything? Is there a sense of shared ownership of issues? Are all of the topics discussed looked at from all angles? How are those decisions being made within the culture of the boardroom itself?
Then that is absolutely right. And the next item to remember in that culture and dynamics is that does the board stay in the area of operation where it should stay, leaving the hiring and the firing of employees in the hands of the management of the organization, so that the only employee that the board really has is the executive director, the CEO. Every other person, those items are left to the management and the operations. So you're looking at the operations and the governance of the organization. And is that wall actually being built so that the two are not combining, so that you are allowing those in management and the organization to do those things that they would be doing as a management entity. And as the board, they're setting out the structure, the culture, the dynamics, and how things will work, and turning that over to management to say, carry it out. So let's look at module 4. So in the 4th month, let's look at what's happening. So in month number 4, we're looking at things like board recruitment, because once a year is when at the annual meeting is generally when boards are looking for new members, particularly if a board has set out term limits for its board members, then it would be time for making sure that you are able to fill any type of skills, knowledge, or abilities that will be exiting your board. So board recruitment is really important. And so that's why we are also talking about how you get involved in making sure that you have interaction and connections with people who sit on a board that you might like to sit on, because that's generally how board members are selected, as we talked about at the beginning of this program. So if you want to make sure that people get to know you and what you can bring to a board. So we also talk about how diversity and genuine representation and on a board is incredibly important for the outstanding operations, and making sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a part of the bigger picture of a board's operation. And then what about the board and staff partnership? How do they partner? How do they work together so that they are not conflicting, but are carrying out in lockstep the operations of the entity? So Jill?
We had a fabulous session in Module 4 last month with our group. We had an executive director who represented the board staff partnership from an executive director's perspective. And we had a board chair talk about it from their perspective. And it was it was an amazing conversation for our cohorts to listen to really understand where the line gets crossed when boards jump into an operational side. Where does the line get crossed when an ED feels like they're responsible to develop and staff up a board? And so it was a fascinating conversation that we had.
That's absolutely right. I think people didn't want to go home after that one. I think they wanted to stay and have more and more conversations. But we said, we promised you 2 hours. So 2 hours, you really do get to go home and have dinner and enjoy the rest of your evening. So let's look at what's happening on our upcoming final month and Module 5 before all of our cohort graduates. So in Module 5, we're bringing together all of the experiences that our cohort was able to engage in during the 5 months of our presentation. So I want you to know that each evening they had homework that they had to do. And as a matter of fact, we had them write what would look like a board, a governance protocol, and what that platform would look like. We had them put together what a committee would look like in each one of these in the board's operations. And they actually created the bylaws of a fictitious board where all of these committees work. so that they could see how everything that they've been learning would be put into place. And so in our upcoming final class, which will occur on the first Monday in June, we are bringing together members of boards of directors from various organizations around the state to talk about how they are seeing their boards operate and expectations that they would like to see if new members were coming on their boards, and having great interactive conversations between the board, between our cohort and all of these amazing board members who are currently sitting as members of fantastic boards around the state. So Jill, what else are we going to do on that wonderful last day of our class?
You know, I think that this becomes the culmination. It's that final kind of graduation ceremony where you get to really reflect back on all that it takes to be of service to an organization as a board member, and the added dimension of how does it feel to be maybe a voice that they haven't heard before. And so one of the things that we are going to talk to you about is what we expect of our graduates, not only just to be on a board, but also to act as peer mentors to the next group, so that we envision that we develop this peer mentor group, and it just continues to grow as we have more and more of these classes that occur. I can speak to what it feels like as a white woman on a board, but Pamela can speak to what it is to be a Black woman on a board, and we have different experiences. And so this last module is really important, that it becomes a sharing time so that people can understand what's happening. It also brings me to this other reason why it's so important to me that we have partners with boards at the beginning of the program, which is we are not going to be putting one of the cohorts onto a board that's not ready to hear their voice and is not ready to honor and respect where they're coming from in their worldview. We're not interested in tokenism in this program.
That's absolutely right. So everyone who sits on a board, we are placing on a board, we are expecting them to be an active member of the board and participating in it. So let's look at what happens. Let's just explain a few more items of our program that we might not have covered before. So in terms of our participation for our speakers, we have asked speakers from around the state to come and join and be a part of the program and a part of the presentation. So as we talked about, there were some incredible speakers, and let me tell you a couple of them. Randy Royster over at the Albuquerque Community Foundation, and Rodney Pupi over at the United Way of Central New Mexico was one of our members. And then we're gonna have some amazing people who will be coming as a part of this roundtable. So we won't tell you who those are tonight because they're going to be great surprises for our class when they come in on their first, for their last class session, and the people that they'll be talking to. We don't want them intimidated. So we were really happy to have these guest speakers, and people came willingly. And I will tell you, there is one thing that was truly, if there's a benefit of COVID, it was the fact that we were able to get these people from around the world, around the country. I won't say around the world. We didn't quite reach out to the world yet, but to have them to come in and to share their views, which we might not otherwise been able to do if a virtual environment had not been in place. So anything else on that one, Jill? So then let's look at what else we did. So our instructors, for example, they were guest speakers, of course, throughout the community and from cooperating organizations within the city, around the state, and in the country. And they were from various different types of a board, various different types of boards. So you name the type of board and we probably had them as a speaker. As we move forward, then at the end of the program with our roundtable, and the members of the boards of directors who are going to be there. The wonderful interaction and conversation that we are expecting to see is going to be fantastic. And to make sure that what we are teaching and what people are learning, we are measuring and taking surveys, because that's important as a part of the program, to make sure that we are measuring what we're doing and that we are meeting the mission, vision, and goal of what we had intended to carry out as a part of this program. So what we do want you to know is that no person who is invited to be a part of the cohort has to pay to be a part of this training program. But we do make one request of every person who participates in the program. And Jill, why don't you tell them what that one request is?
So it's the concept of paying it forward. And so we don't make people pay at the beginning. Instead, what they do is they commit to coming back into the group. They can come in and they can speak at different parts of the different modules and speak from the experiences that they're currently having on their boards, to add to the richness of the voice in the room. And again, going back to this concept of this peer mentorship type of an organization that we need to have. So a support mechanism, a support network is what we're looking at.
So exactly, every single person will be invited to be a member of a board upon the completion of the program. And that is an exciting part of graduating. And then of course, upon completion, each member of our cohort will be placed on the board. And all of you that are here with us today, if you have openings on your board and you are working toward diversity, equity, and inclusion, you want to have a method and a process for making sure that you can meet with people that would meet that requirement of not only bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion to your board, but also are bringing great knowledge, skills, and ability to that board. And as Jill indicated, all participants at the end of the program the following year, at the end of our next cohort, even earlier, if that's where we think we might be, will be asked to come back to talk about their learning experiences and how what they learned in our board training, and in all of the modules that we taught were absolutely implemented, and how they were implemented on the boards that they were asked to sit as a member of. So again, we ask for feedback again that second time, once when they end the program and again when they come back. So we are continuously looking at feedback to make sure that our program grows and provides every single aspect that we promise that it will provide. So at that point in time, let's stop, Jill. Let's have the floor open for questions, because we've been talking for a little while. And I can see that Hannah has a question on her mind, and she's just been itching to ask us. What is that question, Hannah?
I don't know if it's so much a question. It's just that this has been, currently on the minds of board members. But I think that, they kind of speak about this in a very general way, and not recognizing that I'm an executive director. So, not recognizing, like you mentioned, all of those thoughtful points that, this is a strategic direction that the organization needs to take, and it's part of your vision and your planning. And so it's not just about like a token person coming or doing one thing. It's about, it takes time. I guess that's what I'm bringing up. And so that's sort of my frustration or my question, or, what is that? I was thinking like, I was thinking this just now, how do I explain to my co-chairs of my DEAI committee, but also to the board, that this isn't something that overnight you just start doing? Does that help? I mean, that's sort of what's on my mind today.
And that is exactly correct, because living in a culture that doesn't necessarily bring in all these voices is not going to change overnight. Yeah. So your observation is absolutely correct. So it's going to be a process. And you know, to use the cliche, it's going to be a marathon and not a sprint in order to work out. So what we try to do as we talked about this is to talk about this dynamic of putting together a conversation with board during our next cohort, as well as the conversation with those that we're trying to train, to sort of understand what this process might look like. Because when there are differences in cultures that are being brought to the table for discussion, sometimes there are misunderstandings that create lots of miscommunication. And we want to talk about how communication is the key to the factor for making this work. Jill, what else are we missing there?
I think you've hit it on the head, both Hannah and Pamela. This was another one of my major learnings from this beta test, was readiness, board readiness. And I was talking to Robert before you came on about we need a concurrent program for boards. It's not going to happen in 5 months. I mean, that's 5 meetings if you're lucky. It's just not going to happen. And so this is a process. You know, it really is a journey. And it's interesting. I was talking to someone this week about safe spaces, and they said, you know, we're trying to change the nomenclature, and we're trying to call it safer spaces, because it's a journey as well. And things are going to change, and people are going to mess up, and people will get hurt, and there will be arguments. And it's this same kind of a concept. And so what I've been seeking and where I am now is talking to as many people as I can who are doing work in that space. The capacity building across the nation in different states, capacity building to get board members, you know, that you can find those types of capacity building programs in a lot of different states in the US. We don't find capacity building for boards, readiness building for boards, you know, dismantling white supremacy on boards. We don't see that journey. We don't see that. It comes from generally from someone on a board or an ED who's interested and has that passion and is willing to take that risk to begin to make those changes. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to work out is there an organization or is there something that we can do and collaborate with, in partnership with, so that we can be working together on these paths, so that we don't end up with tokenism. And I saw in the chat somebody said like they felt that. Just trying to find out who it was. Sydney said it. Wherever you are. Oh, there you are, Sydney. Yeah, Sydney said, I'm always looking at building better and more reflective boards with people of color, and tired of usually being only 1 or 2 people of color on the boards that Sydney serves on, that she serves on. And, you know, that's right. And so to suggest this is going to happen in 5 months for a board, that, you know, that's not going to happen. But we've got to have some honesty and some vulnerability and willingness to do it.
And so one of the things I'd like to throw out is that your board would like to be our experimental board that we work with over the next year, in placing people of color on your board, watching the dynamics and getting them working together. You know, come to us, because that's exactly what we're looking for, a board that will allow us to work with them as our board to try to make this work, and that we can utilize what we are learning to help other boards. Are there any other questions? And I won't call on you.
We're interested. The Santa Fe Children's Museum. Yeah, we would be interested in working with you all.
That would be awesome.
And I do, just one more thing. I like that you said in the beginning, diversity of thinking, because I think that also with this topic, a lot of times people forget we're all from different backgrounds and experiences, and that also diversifies your board. So whether someone was an Army brat and so they lived overseas and their experience is how that shaped them, that helps bring back to, for example, a Santa Fe Children's Museum board, that experience of as a child, this is how there's just so many ways of diversifying your board. And so I just liked how you said that, because I think sometimes people look at one thing, well, we need people of color, or we need this, but thinking about the overall scope is important as well, right?
Absolutely. That is absolutely correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, we would be interested. Thank you.
We are on the list. Okay.
Great.
Robert, what are the questions in the chat?
I can jump in because Nicole just asked a question about, will you allow current or new board members to join your cohort? We are right now pulling together the next group. And so if you know of people who are interested, even you yourself, if you are interested, go to our website, www.buildingbetterboardsofpeopleofcolor.com. And the very first page, you can input your email address. And as soon as you do that, it comes to me and I'll respond to you immediately. Well, as immediately as I can. And then put you on I'm starting a spreadsheet of the next group. I'm also interested in trying to get another group, gender minority group, pulled together, because that's another area where we're so little voice, so few voices on boards. And so that's another area. So I'm interested in getting funding to do an extra class. That would be that group of cohorts.
Excellent. Are there any, go ahead, Robert.
So I have a question. So how, this is great, the structure of it, preparing people, but afterwards though, when everyone, finally gets to a board, how do you provide the necessary emotional and mental support for people of color? Because let's just be honest, you're entering into a white supremacist system and structure that is literally out there to destroy. So how do you provide the kind of support that people need to not only just navigate it, but also just to do the kind of grief work, the emotional work, and support work that's just absolutely necessary?
So what we will be doing with each one of the cohorts that graduates from our program, we will be staying in contact with them as they're sitting on these boards. And we're not just going to throw them out there and leave them, because to do that could be board suicide, and we don't want that to happen. So we'll be talking about what they're experiencing and what they're feeling. I think that between the two of us, between Jill and myself and others that we've come in contact with in terms of sitting on boards, because I know that I've sat on boards where there are no other African Americans, and sometimes people have not even had conversations with Black people. So it really does create a different type of atmosphere when you're trying to have conversations. And it's also important to know that on every single board, there'll be differences in political views. And then how do you address that when those political views can absolutely determine the way people of color could be affected? So we will be staying in contact with them to make sure that we have those conversations, to make sure that they have the emotional support that they need as they're talking and working through boards, and working with the boards themselves to make sure that they are listening. And if they're truly interested in diversifying, that they have to make sure that these voices are heard, and that people do not feel bad.
Thanks, Pam. You do have a question in the chat from Gloria. Hi, Gloria. Do you see yourselves as a clearinghouse or creating a pipeline of board members that are trained and able to get matched with an organization in need of specific interests, i.e. education, etc.?
You want to take that one, Jill?
Yes, I'm resonating with your word pipeline. So that's the idea. That was the original idea, was to create this pipeline. That was the original idea. Yep. So we've got a pipeline of people coming through who are board ready. And then that's where we come into this of, are we hitting this block of the boards? Because we need also a pipeline coming the other way of boards who are ready so that we can meet in the middle. But Pamela and I are doing a lot of hands-on work and research to match. So the matchmaking is super important. And we've set up multiple interviews with our cohorts and different boards, because the board, all of their bios are on the website. And so we have boards who are reaching out to say, oh, we're very interested in these people. And so we then go and say, these people are interested in you. Are you interested in those boards? Yes or no. And then we establish the relationship and step away for the conversation, whether it's with the ED first, whether it's with the board chair first, depending on what's happening within that board. So it's a very active matchmaking at the moment, is what I think both Pamela and I are both experiencing.
That's wonderful. Thank you for what you're doing. This is a dire need, I would say. I think I mentioned it earlier in the chat that we've just had a hard time retaining folks for over, past their term of service. I've just lost my board chair, so I have an opening there, the critical need, and a secretary. So those are two positions that. Do I just send you an email, Jill, for that? And then, okay, all right, wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, both Pamela and I would welcome any of you to send an email to us and just let us know, where you're interested, where your interests are, and we'll work to partner with you.
So Jill, did you also put your email in the chat?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. So just pop an email off to me. Be great.
Anything else there, Robert? Any other questions?
I'm just scanning the chat, but it looks like we are clear on questions, unless I welcome anybody to unmute and just invite anybody who wants to ask a question specifically, if you have a burning question that you'd like to ask Jill and Pamela.
So as we've been talking about this, a program to other individuals, just as Gloria mentioned, many people have been really, really excited about it. And we are looking forward to showing the fruits of our work and how it will come out. So I'm going to put Heather Ferguson on the spot right now. I know she heads up she's a part of a pretty big board. So Heather, can you tell us a little bit about your board right now? Is it filled with various cultures, or is there something that you're looking to make sure that is added to your board?
Thanks, Pamela. Actually, one of our board chairs is on here as well, Levi Monagle. And so we have kind of been, let me put it this way. Our board membership currently is not reflective of the community that we serve. And that's been something that has been bothering me for years, but specifically since I took over as executive director 2.5 years ago, is trying to find and recruit individuals who are interested in working on democracy issues that come from a better variety of backgrounds and ethnicities than what we currently have. Our board membership is going through some bylaw changes and things. We have some members that have been on there for literally decades, but it is primarily comprised of all white people. And I think that that's been really problematic for us to try to find and recruit and create the criteria that we need to ensure that we're bringing on people who have a vested interest in doing the work and becoming an active member of the board. So I think we're kind of going through a big restructuring at this point, is the best way I can put it.
Oh, very good. So you sound like another candidate for our board program to match people with people of color and then watch how that develops. So
I think we would be really interested in that because our national governing board does have this criteria. They have been very effective in recruitment, and our national governing board is not reflective of most of the state boards in the country, which is great. So it's very diverse and they really prioritize that. I think it's just time that we're going to have to break that down for the states.
It's interesting, Heather, and some of the rest of you. One of the things that we see is I mean, I think boards and bylaws and rules of order, roles and responsibilities, for example, that a board would create. You can see structural racism in there. For example, what about our pay-to-play boards? Oh, if you want to be on here, and it's this where we begin to merge a donor with board service in some senses. Like you must provide $10,000 to be on my board, and so I'm heartened to hear that you're doing some bylaw changes, because that really gets to the heart of some of our problems, especially in the nonprofit sector, where we've confused board service and donors.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Jill, I was just going to say, sorry, this is Shayna Baker. And in addition to the boards that I serve on, I've also advised people that are starting their own nonprofits. And I'm really always encouraging of them to not use, I'm like, sure, it's easy and inexpensive to download boilerplate bylaws and insert your name and change those. But I'm always very encouraging that people, especially when it's, 2 or 3 people starting their own nonprofit, these small nonprofits, is to really be forward thinking and forward looking when they're writing their bylaws to include certain things and avoid others, like you said.
Absolutely. And I think we have time for one more question. And Marisol, I saw your hand.
Thank you. I don't know if it's so much of a question, but I think that maybe one of the things that you mentioned as far as kind of having this sort of building better boards, working with boards. It's our board, for instance, is primarily people of color. We've got about, I think it's like 65% people of color in our board. And so we have a pretty diverse board. I think that the question for me becomes having a diverse board with various experiences and voices being heard. But really, I think that a lot of the problems that we see are kind of systematic racism or bias in funding and in relationship with, whether it be government, whether it be granting organizations, foundations. I wonder then, what is the process that goes from building a better board? Because like say, we have a very diverse board. It doesn't necessarily, we have a lot of equity of voices and different experiences, but I don't know that it necessarily is, there's definitely work to be done past that. And like, what do you see, or what is Pivotal New Mexico? What are different processes that are taking place to try and address these issues, even if we start here at home, like here in Albuquerque, maybe with United Way, Albuquerque Community Foundation. I don't know. Just where I'm saying is, just because you have a diverse board, I feel like there's still a lot of work to be done beyond that. And then the other question I had was, do you bring in people for your program that are outside of New Mexico, people of color that maybe might be interested from other places? In right now with Zoom, I know we have a couple of people serving on our board from other places because of this thing of Zoom. So we have some people from California, some people from the East Coast that are serving on our board that are also people of color that do bring other experiences as well. Our organization is based on, we're a performing arts nonprofit. So we have people that are interested from different parts of the country or different parts of the world. So I was just wondering about.
So thank you for that question. And so what we do recognize is that particularly with boards that do have the diversity, for example, What's often missing is the funding to grow the capacity of their organization and the infrastructure. That's what is often missing. And what we found is that many foundations are saying, we want to know what your programs are and we want to pay for programs, but there are other things that need to be considered. So that's something that we're absolutely working on. One of the heads of one of the largest foundations in the country has recognized that that too is a problem. And so we're happy to see that he recognizes that as an issue, and that when money is being given, that you need to look at the bigger aspect of what could this organization accomplish if indeed there was funding that would allow them to increase their capacity as well as to increase their infrastructure to be more involved within the community. So you hit on a point that we absolutely recognize and that we are looking at. And then the second part of your question, I'm going to let Jill answer because that is her specialty.
Which part was that? The international?
Yeah, the international.
People from outside of Albuquerque or
So,
national.
We, at the moment, what we've had is we've had one speaker outside of New Mexico. So we have had one speaker. It's been an idea that we would love to be able to do that in this group. And that's one of the things I think, I was talking to somebody about the unintended consequence of COVID that's been a benefit, which is accessibility through Zoom. So while it hasn't, through our original funding partners, was not something that was a specific goal of the original funding, even Pamela has talked about really wanting to get a lot more national feel of this. One of the things I'm trying to do is create a type of a model that can be implemented in other parts of the world, or at least other states. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to do, is I would like to be able to take these where we already have capacity building organizations, which we do in many states. We have one here, the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, for example, to be able to create a model or module so that they can take it and then they can own it, for example. So it can be run in Arizona, or it could be run in, there's a fabulous one in Austin, for example. So that's one of the things that I would like to be able to do. And one other thing that we would say is we have somebody in the cohort right now that we are looking to put onto a national government board. So, yeah, I guess we're doing it from different angles. But, I mean, you've got a fabulous organization, Marisol, for this. Fabulous.
Well, thank you. So thank you for answering my question.
Robert, we are out of time. We want people to make sure they can get on to the rest of their day. And we want to we always tell our members of our cohort that we let you go at our designated time. Thank you all so much for your questions, for your attention, and for being here today. We really, really appreciate it. And for those organizations that volunteered, we are definitely looking forward to working with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pamela, and thank you, Jill, and thank you everyone for joining us today for your questions. There was a lot of lively conversation in the chat. I appreciate folks engaging over that platform as well. So we are recording this, so we will make sure that this goes out. The video link goes out to attendees. So look out for that email response probably within the next day or so. But just, again, thank you, Pamela, and to Jill, and to everyone who joined us today. I know Jill had sent your email in the chat. Pamela, did you send your email in the chat too? If you could, that'd be super helpful.
Thank you, Robert. I wanted to rename you. I'm going to put it in there.
Absolutely, and we'll send the chat along as well, just so folks have access to the chat, because I know some information was shared there. So, and that's it. Have a really great rest of your day, y'all. Thanks for staying a little bit over too.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks to Pivotal. Thank you.